أهلا بيكم معانا. النهاردة بنبص على فصل مهم قوي من رواية كلنا عارفينها Great Expectations. الفصل 21 بنشوف فيه البطل بتاعنا بيب، الشاب اللي جاي بأحلام توقعات ضخمة وهو بيوصل لندن لأول مرة. المصدر هو الفصل ده، وهنركز سوا ازاي الكاتب ورانا الصدام ده، يعني بين اللي بيب كان متوقعه والواقع اللي خبط فيه في لندن.
بالظبط. والمهم كمان نشوف ازاي تفاصيل صغيرة قوي يعني ممكن تعدي علينا هي اللي بترسم الصورة الكبيرة، صورة المدينة والتحديات كمان اللي غالبا هيواجهها بيب. دي مش مجرد وصول لمكان جديد وخلاص.
تمام. طيب نبدأ بأول شخصية قابلته في لندن، اللي هو كان المفروض مرشده، السيد ويمك. بصراحة وصفه كان يعني غريب جدا. راجل قصير ناشف كده، وشه مربع بيقولوا خشبي، وفمه زي صندوق البريد، ده غير خواتم حداد كتير لابسها. ايه ده كله؟
بصي، هو ديكنز ما بيحطش تفصيلة كده وخلاص. الوصف ده بالذات يعني بيقول كتير قوي. الوش الخشبي ده والابتسامة اللي بيقولوا عليها ميكانيكية دي غالبا قناع، يعني زي واجهة بيتعامل بيها في لندن. شخصية عملية جدا، وده بيبان في كلامه عن الجريمة، اللي هو عادي ممكن أي حد يتعرض لأي حاجة لو في مصلحة للي بيعمل الجريمة دي، مش شرط يكون شرير يعني.
يعني كأنها طريقة عشان يعرف يعيش في مدينة زي لندن. طب والخواتم دي الكتير اللي لابسها بتاعت الحداد دي؟
ممكن طبعا تكون آلية دفاع، والخواتم دي أنا أعتقد بتلمح لحياة تانية خالص، حياة شخصية يمكن فيها حزن أو فقدان، مختلفة تماما عن الواجهة الناشفة العملية اللي بيظهر بيها في شغله ومع بيب. كأن في شخص تاني مستخبي جوه يمك ده.
تمام. طب ويمك ده كان الدليل، لكن المكان اللي وصلوا بيب اللي هو بارناردز ان دي كانت الصدمة الحقيقية بقى. يعني بيب كان متخيل فندق فخم، حاجة كبيرة، لكن فجأة لقى نفسه في مكان كئيب جدا، متهالك، ريحته وحشة، كله تراب وسخام، لدرجة انه وصفه كأنه مزبلة.
بالظبط. وهنا بقى بنشوف أول شرخ حقيقي في موضوع التوقعات العظيمة اللي بيب كان عايش فيه. بيرناردز إن ده مش مجرد مكان وحش وخلاص، دي يعني أول صفعة من الواقع اللي بتقوله لأ، لندن مش زي ما انت راسمها في خيالك خالص. الوصف الحسي للإضمحلال ده، الريحة والتراب والسخام، قوي جدا فعلا
جدا. ووصف الساحة كمان اللي شبه المدفن دي لوحدها تجيب كآبة. والمشكلة انه ويمك يعني ما فهمش اصلا خيبة امل بيب دي، ده قال ان الهدوء ده بيفكروا بالريف.
وده بيوضح قوي الفجوة الكبيرة بين الاتنين، بين نظرة الشاب اللي لسه واصل ومصدوم ونظرة واحد زي ويمك اللي خلاص اتعود على لندن لدرجة انه شايف الخرابة دي مكان هادي. والاضمحلال المادي ده ممكن كمان يكون رمز لحاجات تانية، يعني ممكن اضمحلال اخلاقي او ببساطة قسوة البيئة نفسها اللي بيب دخلها.
صح. وبعد ما ويمك مشي وسابه كان في موقف تاني، يعني بيب نفسه كان هيموت، شباك السلم المتهالك ده كان هيقع عليه، كأنها تأكيد تاني على قد ايه المكان ده خطر ومتهالك. وبعدها قعد يستنى زميله في السكن اللي هو السيد بوكيت جونيور، وهو بقى حاسس ان لندن دي يعني واخدة اكبر من حجمها بكتير قوي.
تمام. وبعد الجو الكئيب والناشف ده بتاع ويمك والمكان، بيظهر بقى هربرت بوكيت جونيور. وهنا بنشوف اختلاف، وصوله مختلف، جاي بيجري كده وجايب معاه فاكهة فراولة كنوع من الترحيب ببيب، وبيضحكوا سوا لما الباب عصلج معاهم. يعني في لمحة إنسانية كده دفى وسط الجو العام الكئيب ده.
فعلا تحس في حياة شوية. وهربرت كمان كان صريح جدا، يعني على طول وضح الوضع المادي بتاعهم، قال له إن السكن بسيط والعفش إيجار والأكل بيجي من بره على حساب المحامي بتاع بيب جاجرز، وأكد على نقطة إنه بيعتمد على نفسه وإنه مش بياخد مساعدة من والده ومش هيقبلها أصلا.
والصراحة دي مهمة. هربرت هنا بيقدم نفسه كشخص عنده طموح وعنده كرامة، لكن في نفس الوقت واقعي بخصوص ظروفه الحالية، وده بيخلق تضاد مثير للاهتمام مع أحلام بيب الكبيرة قوي دي اللي لسه مش عارفين هتتحقق إزاي وعلى حساب مين.
وهنا بقى بتحصل المفاجأة الأكبر، اللحظة اللي بتربط كل حاجة ببعض. بيب وهو بيبص لهربرت كويس بيفتكره.
أيوة،
بيفتكر إنه الشاب الشاحب اللي اتخانق معاه زمان في جنينة الأنسة هافشام.
وفي نفس الوقت بالظبط هربرت كمان بيتعرف عليه وبيقول له انت الولد اللي كان بيتشقلب. ياه، محظة عبقرية من ديكنز. الماضي بيظهر فجأة كده في قلب لندن في الظروف الجديدة دي كلها.
بالظبط، دي مش مجرد صدفة أكيد، دي ربطت ماضي بيب الريفي البسيط ده بحاضره الجديد في لندن بكل تعقيداته. يعني أول شخص ممكن يبقى صديق ليه في رحلته الجديدة دي هو نفسه الشخص اللي اتخلق معاه زمان.
تماما، وده بيفتح أسئلة كتير بقى. هل العلاقة دي هتساعد بيب؟ هتبقى صداقة حقيقية ولا ممكن تكون مصدر لمشاكل جديدة وتعقيدات؟ المؤكد إنها بتربط رحلة صعوده الاجتماعي دي بأفعاله ولقاءاته القديمة.
يبقى لو هنلخص أهم نقط خرجنا بيها من الفصل ده، الانطباع الأول عن لندن كان صادم من خلال ويمك والواقعي قوي ده والمكان الكئيب بارناردز إن اللي حطم توقعات بيب، وبعدين اللقاء المفاجئ مع هربرت اللي فيه لمحة إنسانية ودفء، وأخيراً الربط العبقري ده بالماضي في لحظة التعارف.
بالظبط. ونقطة أخيرة كده ممكن نسيبها للتفكير، يا ترى التجربة الأولية دي بكل خيبة الأمل والصدمة اللي فيها دي إزاي ممكن تشكل نظرة بيب لرحلته كلها بعد كده؟ وإزاي ممكن تأثر على فهمه هو نفسه لمعنى التوقعات العظيمة دي في البيئة الجديدة والقاسية دي؟
Okay, let's dive in. When you picture London, you probably think, busy, modern, all the landmarks. But imagine kind of peeling back those layers, almost like opening an old history book. You find this hidden city underneath full of really curious characters and, well, unexpected moments.
Absolutely. And it's often that fresh perspective, someone seeing you for the first time, that really picks up on things. Things that maybe people who live there just, stop noticing after a while. They filter it out.
Exactly. And that's really what we're doing today. We're looking at this literary snapshot of London through the eyes of a newcomer. They're being guided by this very unusual local character. And we want to unpack what these first moments tell us about the city, about the people there.
Yeah, and this viewpoint is great because it's so ground level. It's not some polished tour guide version. It's raw, maybe a bit confused even. Just someone stepping into this big new place.
Right. So the source we're using, it's this passage that describes someone's first few days in London. And their guide is this fellow named Mr. Wemmick. And believe me, he is quite the character. Definitely worth a closer look.
Oh, definitely. The author doesn't waste any time painting a really strong picture of him. Very peculiar.
Totally. Let's start right there with Wemmick. The description is so vivid. He's called a dry man, rather short, with a square wooden face.
Mm-hmm.
What does that initial image, that almost carved look, suggest to you straight away?
Well, it immediately gives you a feeling of someone maybe a bit stiff or emotionally reserved, perhaps. That wooden face, it makes you think of something inflexible, maybe hinting at a hard life, or just a personality that doesn't really show much motion.
And then it gets even more specific. Imperfectly chipped out with a dull-edged chisel. I mean, that's quite a line. What does that kind of detail add?
It suggests maybe a lack of polish, or like you said, maybe he feels a bit unfinished, rough around the edges. It makes him seem very real, though, not some idealized figure, very tangible.
And the dints instead of dimples, that's such a specific contrast. What's that telling us?
Yeah, it sort of implies a life that hasn't exactly been full of, laughter and softness. Dints makes you think of something harder, maybe marks left by hardship, not just natural features.
Then you get these other clues, almost sad ones, about his life. At least 4 mourning rings, this brooch with a lady, a willow tree, a tomb. It's quite a collection he's wearing. What stands out there?
The number of rings, first off, 4 or more. That's quite a few. It could point to the time period, higher mortality rates, or perhaps just a culture where displaying grief outwardly was more common. But yeah, the whole collection on the brooch really doubles down on this sense of loss and remembrance in his past.
But then it's contrasted with his eyes, right? Glittering eyes, small, keen, and black. And those thin, wide, mottled lips. There's a kind of sharpness there, despite the overall dry impression. How do those fit together?
I think it shows he's complex. The overall feeling might be dryness, maybe even sadness, but those sharp eyes, they hint at something else. Alertness, maybe shrewdness, some kind of hidden spark. The mottled lips just add another layer of visual detail, maybe age, or, I don't know, a certain kind of temperament.
And his age is put at from 40 to 50. So he's at that point where he's definitely seen a few things. So just from this sketch, we get this really memorable character. maybe a bit world-weary even.
Exactly. It's such a rich physical description. It really makes you think about what kind of life, what kind of city could shape someone like that.
Okay, so we've got our guide, Mr. Wemmick. Now, the newcomer's first big question about London is basically, is this place really wicked? What does that question tell you about maybe the expectations people had coming to a big style back then?
Well, it taps into that classic idea of the city, doesn't it? Both then and now, really. A place of big opportunities, sure, but also potential dangers. A real departure from maybe the perceived safety of the countryside. So probably a mix of excitement and definite nervousness.
And Wemmick's answer is just so blunt. You may get cheated, robbed, and murdered in London, but there are plenty of people anywhere who'll do that for you. What's your take on that cynicism?
It's very pragmatic, isn't it? Almost deflating. He's basically saying, look, bad things happen everywhere. Maybe it's his way of coping, not getting too worked up about the city's dangers because, well, danger exists everywhere. It's not unique to London, just maybe more concentrated.
And then he adds that kicker. They'll do it if there's anything to be got by it. The newcomer says that makes it worse. Why is that element, that opportunism, maybe more chilling?
Because it makes it impersonal, right? It's not about hate or anger. It's just cold calculation, someone hurting you just because it's convenient or profitable. Yeah, that can feel colder, more pervasive than, say, a personal attack.
But Wemmick just brushes it off. Much about the same, I should say. He seems totally unfazed. What does that say about his experience of London?
It really suggests he's been around the block, seen a lot. Maybe he's become desensitized to it all. It points to a kind of resilience, maybe, or perhaps just resignation. This is just how things are.
And his whole manner backs this up. Hat tipped back, staring straight ahead, totally self-contained, like nothing in the street is worth his notice. He seems almost detached from it all, even the potential threats.
Yeah, that detachment could be a survival mechanism, couldn't it? In a city that's maybe overwhelming, busy, potentially dangerous, maybe tuning a lot of it out is how you navigate it without being constantly on edge. Keep your own little bubble.
Which brings us to that description of his smile, or non-smile. His mouth is such a post office of a mouth that he had a mechanical appearance of smiling. And then the narrator realizes it was merely a mechanical appearance and that he was not smiling at all. What does that tell us? About his interactions, maybe his inner state?
Oh, that post office mouth image is brilliant. Like it's just a slot for words to go in and out, purely functional, not really for expressing genuine feeling. That mechanical smile, it feels like a social obligation.
Yeah.
A mask, not real happiness. It could suggest he's just emotionally worn out, or maybe he lives a life where real connection isn't a big feature.
So they're walking through this London, which sounds potentially risky, and the newcomer needs to find Mr. Matthew Pocket. Turns out he lives in Hammersmith, west of London, about 5 miles out. What does that distance tell us about London's scale back then?
5 miles would have felt like quite a trek, I imagine. It definitely shows London was already sprawling. Even then, distinct areas, travel within the city itself being a real undertaking, not just a quick hop.
And the newcomer keeps asking questions, prompting Wemmick to call him a regular cross-examiner, but interestingly, with an approving air. Why do you think Wemmick appreciates that directness?
Maybe because Wemmick himself is pretty blunt and pragmatic. He might respect someone who just gets to the point, asks what they need to know. Or maybe it's like a little test. He's seeing if this newcomer has some grit, some curiosity.
But then, when Wemmick admits he knows Mr. Pocket, it's with this air of toleration or depreciation. Not exactly a ringing endorsement. What could that hint at? About their relationship or how Wemmick sees Pocket?
Yeah, that's interesting. He could imply all sorts of things. Maybe a difference in, social standing.
Yeah.
Or different values. Perhaps Wemmick, being so grounded in the city's gritty reality, sees Pocket as someone a bit out of touch. Maybe a bit naive or impractical.
Well, wherever Pocket stands, they eventually get to Barnard's Inn, which is definitely not the hotel the newcomer was picturing. It's called the dingiest collection of shabby buildings ever squeezed together in a rank corner as a club for tomcats. Wow, what a first impression of London accommodation.
Huh. Yeah, that line just completely demolishes any romantic ideas about London digs, doesn't it? Club for tomcats. It just evokes this image of chaos, neglect, something almost feral and uncivilized.
And the description just keeps piling it on. A melancholy little square, a flat burying ground, dismal trees, dismal sparrows, dismal cats, dismal houses, That repetition of dismal really hits you. What effect does that have?
It's oppressive, isn't it? The repetition just hammers home this overwhelming sense of gloom, of decay. It creates this picture of a place utterly sunk in neglect, where even the birds and trees seem sad and run down.
Then you notice the to let signs everywhere. What does that detail add to the picture?
Oh, it's a clear sign of decline, right? It shouts that nobody wants to be there. People are leaving, not arriving. It just reinforces that feeling of decay and a total lack of energy or life.
And it's not just visual decay. It hits all the senses. The frowsy morning of soot and smoke, the feeling of ashes on its head, dry rot and wet rot. Even the smells are hinted at. Rot of rat and mouse and bug and coaching stables. It's really visceral. Why focus so much on these sensory details?
Well, hitting multiple senses just makes the decay feel so much more real, so much more pervasive. You can almost smell it, feel the damp. It's not just describing shabbiness. It's immersing you in a place that feels like it's literally crumbling and rotting.
Right.
It really highlights the unglamorous side of city life back then. Probably pretty unhealthy, too.
Yeah, you can feel the newcomer's shock. And Wemmick tries to lighten the mood, comparing it to the quiet countryside, but it just completely falls flat. What does that disconnect show?
It just highlights how different their perspectives are, probably stemming from totally different backgrounds and experiences. Wemmick, maybe he's so used to London's harshness that this grim quiet seems almost peaceful, whereas the newcomer, expecting something, well, better, is just hit with the squalor. It shows how our experiences shape how we see the exact same place.
So then they have to go up these stairs that are slowly collapsing into sawdust. Not reassuring. They find a note on Mr. Pocket Jr.'s door, return shortly. Looks like they're early. And Wemmick leaves, but not before this really awkward handshake moment. What do you make of his social awkwardness there?
Yeah, it just adds to his whole eccentric vibe, doesn't it? It sort of emphasizes that he maybe lives a bit outside the normal social rules, makes him more memorable, definitely more intriguing.
And literally seconds after he leaves, this rotting window sash crashes down, just missing the newcomer. It's like this moment of, dark slapstick that just perfectly underlines how rundown and dangerous Barnard's Inn actually is.
Exactly. It adds that touch of drama, maybe even dark humor, but mostly just reinforces the neglect and, the actual physical danger of the place.
So the newcomer waits and waits. Ends up writing his name in the grime on the window. Classic boredom move. Finally, Mr. Pocket Jr. bursts in all out of breath, carrying paper bags, strawberries, apologizing because he thought they were coming on a later coach. What does this sudden energy, this thoughtfulness do to the scene coming right after all that decay?
It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? It's like a sudden burst of life and basic human kindness in the middle of all that gloom. The strawberries, especially from Covent Garden Market, that's such a nice, thoughtful human touch. Shows there's still vitality here, somewhere.
And then comes the big twist, the recognition. They both sort of jump back, startled, and realize they've met before. Lord bless me, you're the prowling boy, and you, said I, are the pale young gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
What are the implications of that, the sudden, unexpected connection?
Well, it suddenly injects this element of destiny. Or maybe just coincidence, but it feels significant. Interconnectedness. It suggests this whole arrival in London isn't just random chance. Past events, past meetings are maybe going to influence what happens next. It makes the whole narrative feel tighter somehow, like things are coming together. So looking back at this this deep dive into London through these eyes, it's a real place of contrast. It's big, bustling, maybe dangerous, grand in reputation, but hiding these pockets of serious decay. And the first encounters, some really odd characters, some grim settings, but also these little sparks of kindness and this hint of connections from the past bubbling up. It makes you think, doesn't it? Thinking back to your own experiences, maybe the first time you went to a totally new city or environment, what were those specific little details that stuck with you? The sounds, the smells, the first people you met, and how did those initial impressions really color how you felt about the place?
Right, and this glimpse into London back then, through this specific lens, it leaves us with a pretty interesting thought, I think. In our world today, which feels maybe more connected, more known, how much of that original sense of wonder and maybe fear and the chance for completely unexpected meetings, how much of that still exists when we step into a new city? What are today's versions of those, dismal sparrows or those sudden surprising recognitions?